The night was quiet, but it was not peaceful. A pale silver moon hung in the sky above Castle Vareda. The moon was full, and in vampire tradition, it was called the execution moon. On this night, every 100 years, werewolf prisoners were brought to the castle to be judged and killed. The nobles of the vampire court sat high above the courtyard, dressed in black and red, sipping blood wine and laughing. Below them, chained werewolves were dragged into the center of the courtyard. Their faces were tired. Their bodies were bruised. Most of them did not speak. They had accepted their fate. But one of them stood tall. Cale the Thorniclaw. His hands were tied in silver cuffs and blood dripped from his lip. But his golden eyes burned like fire. He did not bow. He did not beg. He stared at the crowd above, eyes full of anger, full of courage. The vampire guards pushed him forward, forcing him to kneel before the high steps of the queen's throne. Queen Azrael sat there, tall and cold like stone. She did not smile. Her crown glowed with red jewels, and her voice echoed through the courtyard. "This one," she said, looking at Cale, "was the son of an alpha. He burned our cities. He led the raid on Riverhelm. He deserves no mercy." The crowd cheered. A vampire executioner raised his blade, stepping forward to end it. Then it happened. A small voice spoke, cutting through the noise. "Him," said the voice. Everything stopped. From the edge of the queen's throne, a little girl stepped forward. She looked no older than 10. Her skin was pale like the moon, and her eyes were strange, one blue, one gold. She wore a silk dress and a royal necklace. She was not just any child. She was Princess Eleonora, the only daughter of Queen Azrael. She pointed her finger directly at Cale. The silence was thick. Queen Azrael looked down, confused. "Eleonora, what are you doing?" "I want that one spared," the little princess said calmly. "He's the one from my dreams." Gasps echoed around the court. Vampires whispered to each other, shocked. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke. But the queen did not laugh. Cale, still kneeling, stared at the child. He did not understand. Queen Azrael stood up. "You speak of dreams? This is no bedtime story, child. That thing is a killer." But Eleonora did not step back. "He's important. I saw it. If he dies, the kingdom will fall." The queen's hands clenched. Her guards waited for her order. Then she raised her hand, stopped the blade. Cale's life was spared. But he was not free. Chains were wrapped tighter around his wrists and neck. He was taken away, down into the dark dungeons below the castle. And all the while, Eleonora watched him with curious eyes. That night, everything began to change. The werewolf who refused to bow, and the vampire girl who pointed at him. Cale sat in the cold darkness of the castle dungeon. Thick chains bound his hands and feet. Silver rings around his arms burned with every small movement. The stone floor beneath him was wet and smelled of mold and old blood. Rats squeaked in the shadows, but Cale didn't care. He had survived the execution moon, but why? He had faced death before, but never like this. A little girl that saved him, a vampire child. And she had said strange words. "He's the one from my dreams." What did that mean? He didn't believe in vampire magic, but her eyes, one blue, one gold, had stirred something deep inside him, something ancient. The heavy iron door creaked open. Cale raised his head slowly. He expected guards or maybe the queen herself, but it was her, the same little girl from the throne. Princess Eleonora stepped inside, holding a lantern in one hand and a small leather book in the other. 2 silent guards waited outside the door as she entered. "You came," Cale said, his voice rough. "I told you I would," she said softly. She sat down on a clean stone near him. Her silk dress brushed against the cold floor. She looked far too calm for a princess inside a dungeon. "Why?" he asked. Eleonora looked at him closely. "Because I've seen you. Many times. In my dreams. You wore the same chains. But in the end, they broke. You were not just a prisoner. You were something more. Cale laughed bitterly. A dream doesn't change what I am. I'm a werewolf. Your people call us beasts. She shook her head. Not all of us. My father was a werewolf too. Cale's eyes widened. What? Eleonora opened her book. Inside were drawings. A wolf and a bat. A man with golden eyes. A woman with a crown. Symbols of sun and moon. My mother never speaks of him. But I found this hidden in the old library. It tells of a child born of both bloods. One who will bring balance. Cale stared at the drawings. He didn't understand all of it, but something inside him stirred again. You think that child is you? He asked. Eleonora looked up at him. No, I think it's us. Cale didn't know what to say. She stood up and placed the lantern on the ground beside him. I'll come again tomorrow, she whispered. As she walked out, Cale's eyes followed her. For the first time in many years, he felt something he thought was long gone. Hope. Down in the darkness, with chains burning his skin and no sunlight in sight, something had changed. Not just his fate, but the fate of the world above. The little vampire girl had not chosen him by mistake. And deep within his heart, Cale knew the story between them was just beginning. Every night, Princess Eleonora came back to the dungeon. Sometimes she brought books. Other times she brought food. But more often she brought questions. Cale, still chained to the cold stone wall, answered her with silence at first. He didn't trust her. She was a vampire princess, and he was a werewolf warrior. Their kind had been enemies for hundreds of years. But slowly things began to change. She was not like the others. Eleonora didn't speak with cruelty or pride. She asked about the forests he had grown up in, about the stars above the mountains, about the pack he had lost. He didn't know when, but one night he started answering her. He told her about the last war, about how the vampires had invaded Forniclaw Valley, how his father had fallen protecting their people, how Cale had sworn to fight until his last breath. Eleonora listened closely. Her face was soft, sad. I'm sorry, she whispered. Cale looked at her. Why? Because we only hear one side of the story up there, she said. They tell us you're monsters, but you speak like a man. Cale smiled for the first time. It was small, but it was real. You're not what I expected either, he said. That night she showed him something special. From a small box, she pulled out an old dagger. The blade was dark and curved like the crescent moon. Strange runes glowed faintly along the handle. This is the Moon Mirror Blade, she said. It's one of the lost relics from before the war. Cale's eyes narrowed. Why bring it here? Because I think it's meant for you, she said. He shook his head. You're wrong. Eleonora didn't argue. She placed the blade gently near his feet and said, If you ever want to break your chains, this might be the key. The next morning, the queen found out. Guards stormed the dungeon. Cale was beaten again. The blade was taken. Eleonora was locked in her room. But the damage was done. Something had awakened. Eleonora stared out her window, bruises on her arms, but her eyes were filled with fire. She had made a decision. She would no longer follow her mother's path. Cale sat in the dark again, blood on his face, but a voice echoed in his memory. If you want to break your chains, and he would. Not just for himself, but for her. That night, as the moonlight slipped through the cracks in the dungeon ceiling, Cale whispered the ancient words he remembered from his father's stories. The chains trembled. The pact between vampire and werewolf had begun, not with war, but with a bond. A quiet, dangerous, powerful bond. The moon was full again, casting a soft light through the broken windows of the ruined temple deep in the forest. Eleonora stood at the center, her hands shaking slightly as she held the old book of spells. Cale stood across from her, free from his chains for the first time in weeks. They had escaped together. She had used secret tunnels beneath the castle, risked everything to bring him here. Now they stood inside the lost Temple of Shadows, an ancient place where vampires and werewolves once lived in peace before the war tore their world apart. Cale looked around. Dust covered the floors. Moss grew on the stones. But something about this place felt alive. "This is where it must happen," Eleonora said quietly. "The ritual of reversal. It's the only way to unlock your true power, the power that's hidden inside your blood." Cale frowned. "I don't trust magic." "I know," she said gently. "But it's not just magic, it's old truth. Before the war, this ritual was used to bring balance between our kinds." He looked at her. "And what will it cost?" Eleonora hesitated. "1 drop of blood, from each of us, shared willingly. Then you must speak the vow. If your heart is pure, the transformation will begin." Cale didn't like the idea of blood rituals, but he trusted Eleonora. He had seen the risk she had taken for him. She had defied her mother, betrayed her people, and almost lost her life. He stepped forward. "Then let's do it." Eleonora pulled out a small dagger. Her hands were steady now. She cut the tip of her finger and let a drop of blood fall onto a smooth stone between them. Then she handed the blade to Cale. He did the same. His golden eyes locked with hers. Their blood touched on the stone. The air grew warm. The ground beneath them trembled. Light poured from the old carvings on the walls. The runes glowed bright, pulsing like a heartbeat. Cale stepped forward and placed his hand on the stone. He spoke the words Eleonora had taught him. "Let this bond be our truth. Let the chains of hate be broken. I vow to protect what was lost, and to rise for what must be found." A rush of wind burst through the temple. Cale's body glowed with gold and silver light. He cried out, not in pain, but in power. His muscles tightened. His eyes burned brighter than ever before. He was changing, not into a full beast, but into something new. A balance, a dawnblood. Eleonora fell to her knees, watching in awe. She smiled through tears. "It worked," she whispered. Cale stood tall, breathing hard, his chest rising with strength. The chains were gone forever, and something greater had awakened. Not just in him, but between them. The ritual was complete. Their bond was sealed. High Queen Ezreal stood at the top of her black tower, her red cloak flowing behind her in the cold wind. Her sharp eyes scanned the valley below, where her guards were riding fast through the woods. She already knew what had happened. Her daughter was gone. The werewolf was gone. And the moon mirror blade was missing. Ezreal's hands clenched the stone railing. She had trusted Eleonora. She had protected her for years, kept her away from war and blood. But now the child had broken the law of their kind. She had freed a werewolf. Worse, she had taken him to the ancient temple. The queen's voice echoed like thunder through the hall below. "Call the Crimson Guard. Find them. Bring them back, dead or alive." Back in the forest, Cale and Eleonora moved carefully through the shadows. After the ritual, Cale felt different, stronger, sharper. His senses had grown. He could hear every leaf, smell every drop of rain, and feel the heartbeat of the earth. But his heart beat loudest for one reason: Eleonora. She walked beside him, her steps light and sure, but her eyes full of worry. "She will come after us," Eleonora said. "My mother never shows mercy, not even to her own blood." Cale nodded. "Then we keep moving." But Eleonora stopped. "No, we can't just run." He looked at her, surprised. "She'll never stop," Eleonora said. "She'll keep hunting us, hunting every werewolf, unless we do something." "What are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying we fight back." Cale's eyes burned with silent fire. That night, they reached the edge of the Forbidden Pines, a place few dared to go. It was where the old werewolf clans once lived, before the vampires destroyed their lands. Now only ruins remained, hidden under thick trees and mist. Cale knelt and touched the ground. The scent of his people was still there, like faded memories. He whispered a name: Thorniclaw. Eleonora placed her hand on his shoulder. "This is where it begins. Not just for us, for everyone." Suddenly, a noise came from the trees. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Cale stood. They found us. Out of the fog came vampire riders, armored and fast. Their leader wore a red cloak. The Crimson Guard. Cale looked at Eleonora. "Stay behind me." "No," she said. "We stand together." Cale took a deep breath. His body began to shift. Not fully wolf, not fully man. His eyes glowed with golden light. His claws shone like blades. The battle began with a roar. Cale moved like wind and fire. Eleonora, using old spells, cast shields of light and waves of shadow. The forest lit up with magic and fury. When the last rider fell, Cale stood in silence, blood on his hands, breath heavy. Eleonora stepped beside him. "This is just the beginning." And far away, in the Black Tower, Queen Azrael watched the smoke rise from the pines. Her fury burned brighter than ever. The war had begun. The fires in the forbidden pines had died down, but something greater had awakened. The ground was still. The trees whispered. The old spirits of the forest, long forgotten, stirred again. And the wind carried a message across the mountains and valleys. The Dawnblood walks again. Cale and Eleonora stood at the heart of the ruined werewolf village, surrounded by broken stones and moss-covered walls. Cale's eyes scanned the place where he once lived as a child. It had been silent for years. But now he felt it. Energy in the earth, strength returning to the land. "The forest remembers," Cale said quietly. Eleonora knelt beside a carved stone, brushing away dirt and vines. "These are your ancestors," she said, reading the names in the old language. This place was more than a home. It was a kingdom. Cale nodded. "And we will build it again." But first, they had to wake the others. Word spread through the hidden paths and dark caves. Old werewolves, once in hiding, began to rise. They came in twos and threes, scared, broken, but curious. They came from icy cliffs, deep forests, and forgotten ruins. They came because they had heard the howl. Cale stood before them, not as a prisoner, but as a leader. "I am Cale of Thorniclaw," he said, his voice strong. "You were told we were defeated, that our blood was cursed, but I tell you this, our time is not over." He looked at Eleonora. "This is Eleonora, daughter of the Vampire Queen. She stood beside me when no one else would. She is not our enemy. She is our future." The werewolves were silent at first. Then one of the elders stepped forward. He was old, gray, and walked with a cane. "I remember your father," he said. "He spoke of peace before the war stole everything." Cale bowed his head. "I will honor his dream. But to have peace, we must earn it. We must fight for it." The elder placed his hand on Cale's shoulder. "Then we follow you." Cheers broke out. The howl of unity rose high into the sky. The wilds were awake again. Far away in vampire cities, strange things began to happen. Blood stopped flowing properly in the Queen's sacred fountains. Ancient bats flew in circles, restless. The stars over Castle Vareda shifted slightly, showing signs of change. And worst of all, some young vampires began to dream. Dreams filled with golden light and the sound of wolves. Queen Azrael felt it too. The balance of power was moving. She stood before her dark mirror, watching the images of Cale and Eleonora together. "They think love can change fate," she whispered coldly. "Then I will show them what true fate looks like." She raised her hands. The sky over her castle turned red. War was not coming. War had already begun. Thunder rolled above Castle Vareda as dark clouds covered the sky. The Queen's tower glowed red, a sign to all vampire cities. Prepare for war. Inside the throne room, Queen Azrael stood tall. Her black dress flowed like shadow, her crown sharp like thorns. Around her, vampire lords and soldiers knelt, waiting for her orders. "We gave them mercy," she said. "We offered them silence. They chose fire." She turned toward her generals. "Gather every blade. Wake the blood-bound army. Tonight, we end the werewolf bloodline forever." Her voice echoed across the stone walls. Outside the city, far beyond the mist, Cale stood with Eleonora and their growing army of werewolves. He wore black armor, light but strong. His eyes glowed gold, and a new symbol was painted on his chest, a rising sun between a wolf and a bat. Eleonora stood beside him in silver robes, her hands wrapped in ancient markings of magic. She had grown stronger with every spell, every battle. She was no longer a hidden princess. She was a leader. "We can't let them come to us," Cale said. "We strike first." Eleonora nodded. "We burn the throne." They marched through the valleys, past cold rivers and broken roads. Wolves howled beside them. Old spirits rose from the trees, guiding their path. By midnight, they reached the gates of Castle Vareda. The vampires were ready. Flaming arrows lit the sky. Blades clashed. Screams echoed. The ground shook under the weight of both armies. It was a battle the world would never forget. Cale fought like a storm, fast, sharp, and full of fire. He leaped through shadows, tearing through enemy lines. No blade could hold him. Eleonora used her spells to shield their warriors. Light burst from her hands. Darkness twisted around her feet. She stood at the center, her voice calm, her heart steady. Finally, Cale reached the throne room. Queen Azrael waited there, standing before her dark mirror. "So you've come," she said. Cale stepped forward. "I came to end this." Azrael laughed coldly. "You think love can save your kind? You are a mistake, a crack in fate, and I will seal it myself." She raised her sword, black as night. Cale blocked it with the moon mirror blade. The clash shook the room. They fought, steel against magic, fire against shadow. Sparks flew. The ground cracked. Then Eleonora stepped in. "Mother," she said, "this ends now." Azrael turned, shocked. "You would strike me down." Eleonora's eyes glowed. "Not to kill you, to free you." She cast one final spell, light and shadow in perfect balance. The dark mirror shattered. Azrael fell to her knees. The blood-bound magic that had ruled for centuries faded into dust. The war was over. Cale and Eleonora stood side by side, hearts pounding, hands clasped. The blood throne burned behind them, and a new dawn began to rise. Morning light touched the land for the first time in centuries. Golden rays spread across the broken walls of Castle Vareda. Smoke rose gently from the battlefield, but the sounds of war were gone. Only silence remained, the kind that came after a long, painful storm. Cale stood on the high tower where the queen's flag once flew. Now the black banner of vampires had been replaced with a new symbol, a golden sun with a wolf and bat curled together, side by side. He looked down at the city. The streets were filled with both werewolves and vampires, no longer enemies, just survivors. They worked together to clean the ruins, care for the wounded, and bury the fallen. The war was over, but the healing had just begun. Eleonora walked up the stairs behind him. Her silver robe flowed in the soft breeze. Her hair, once neat and perfect, was now wild and free. Her eyes, glowing gently, met his. "It's strange," she said, standing beside him. "For the first time the sun is rising, and no one is hiding." Cale nodded. "We did what no one believed possible." They stood there for a moment, quiet. Then Eleonora reached into her cloak and pulled out a small scroll. She opened it and read aloud. "On this day we begin the Dawnblood reign. No one shall rule by fear. No blood shall be hunted. No child shall be cursed by their birth." She handed it to Cale. He added the last line. "We rise not as beasts or shadows, but as equals, bound by truth, born from hope." That scroll would later become the first law of the new land. In the weeks that followed, the Dawnblood Council was formed. Elders from vampire clans and werewolf packs joined together. New homes were built in the Forbidden Pines. The old ruins were turned into learning halls and gardens. Magic and history were taught side by side. Cale became the guardian of the wilds. He trained young werewolves, teaching them honor and restraint. Eleonora became the keeper of the balance. She guided magic with wisdom and led peace talks across the kingdoms. They were not crowned as king or queen. They had no thrones, no royal titles, but the people followed them with love, not fear. One night, as stars filled the sky, Cale and Eleonora walked hand in hand through the valley. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "When I pointed at you." Cale smiled. "All the time." "Why do you think I chose you?" she asked playfully. He looked at her warm and steady. "Because your heart saw something mine had forgotten, a future worth fighting for." They kissed under the open sky, not as a vampire and a werewolf, but as two souls who had changed the world together. The moon watched from above. The sun waited for tomorrow. And the Dawnblood era began with love, peace, and the courage to never repeat the past.